In 1885, one European king quietly became the legal owner of a country the size of Western Europe without ever living there. The paperwork was neat, the violence it unleashed was not. By the end, you'll understand exactly how Leopold II turned treaties, maps, and diplomacy into a private empire in the Congo, and how that paper empire translated into forced labor, terror, and international complicity. This isn't just a story about one ruler's greed, it's a blueprint for how modern power can hide behind contracts, philanthropy, and bureaucracy, while millions pay the price. How did Leopold II convince the world to sign off on his Congo Free State? And what, precisely, did he promise that everyone pretended to believe? Night has fallen in Berlin. The lamps are low. Ink dries on paper that will redraw a continent. It is February of 1885. Inside the conference hall, men in tailored coats lean over maps of Central Africa. They do not speak the languages of the rivers they trace with their fingers. They do not know the names the people there use for their own towns. And yet, in this room, they decide who will own the Congo. A secretary reads the words out loud. Signatures follow. Seals press into wax. In that moment, an empire is born without an army marching, without a flag raised on a battlefield. It is born on paper. Outside, the city is quiet. Inside, the future is being assigned. One man has come to this conference with a strange claim. He says he is not building a colony. He says he is building a cause. His name is Leopold II, King of the Belgians, and tonight he will walk away with a country. But how do you take a land you have never set foot in and convince the world it is yours to save? To understand that night, you have to meet Leopold as he wants to be seen. A constitutional king, limited powers, a small European state. Belgium is young, squeezed between larger neighbors, and not meant to frighten anyone. Leopold hates that. He reads the newspapers and sees the age he lives in. Britain takes India. France expands in Africa and Asia. Germany rises fast. For Leopold, prestige is not decoration. It is survival. He believes a colony will make Belgium rich, and him remembered, but Belgium's parliament will not pay for his dream. His ministers warn him. The public is not eager. So Leopold changes the plan. If Belgium will not have an empire, then Leopold will. Not as a state project. As a personal one, he begins to speak in the language that opens doors in Europe. Not conquest, not profit. Civilization, science, humanity. He frames his ambition as a moral mission. He will fight the slave trade. He will build roads. He will bring progress. This is the first layer of his paper empire, because paper is where legitimacy begins. The question is not whether the Congo is valuable. Everyone suspects it is. The question is how Leopold can be the one to claim it without looking like a thief. In the late 1870s, one name carries weight in Europe's imagination of Africa: Henry Morton Stanley. Famous for his dramatic search for a missing explorer. Famous for his hard travel and hard words. A man who can survive rivers that kill others. Leopold watches Stanley the way a gambler watches a loaded deck. Stanley has done what Europe craves. He has mapped. He has measured. He has described the Congo River as a highway into the interior. And Leopold understands something crucial. Maps are invitations. If you can draw the line, you can sell the idea that the line is real. Leopold approaches Stanley with money and purpose. He does not ask for an army. He asks for agreements, treaties, signatures, marks made by chiefs who are told they are signing friendships, trade arrangements, protection. On Leopold's side, the documents will be filed as transfers of sovereignty. Two meanings in one stroke of ink. Stanley goes back to the Congo and begins building stations along the river. They look like outposts. They function like anchors. Each station is a claim. Each claim is backed by paper, and the papers will be carried back to Europe like trophies. But what did the people who signed those papers think they were agreeing to? Leopold didn't conquer the Congo with an army first, he conquered it with language. So why did so many diplomats accept a king's humanitarian project with almost no proof it was real? Forget the jungle for a moment. This story begins in bright European drawing rooms, where a single signature can move an entire river basin, and one signature is about to do exactly that. Leopold creates organizations with noble names, international associations, committees for exploration, societies for civilization. To the public, they sound like charities. To diplomats, they sound neutral, scientific, cooperative. To Leopold, they are masks. A private king needs public respectability. He needs something that looks bigger than his own hunger. So he hosts conferences. He invites geographers and philanthropists. He flatters abolitionists. He speaks about ending slavery. He speaks about opening the interior to trade. He rarely speaks about rubber, or ivory, or the taxes that will be extracted in labor. The associations collect donations and endorsements. They collect names. They collect credibility, and credibility is currency. Because the real battlefield is not in the Congo yet, it is in Europe. It is in ministries and newspapers and salons. Leopold is building a story where the Congo is not being taken. It is being rescued, so when the time comes, the world will feel it is approving a humanitarian project, not signing away a nation. But why are Europe's powers willing to believe him at all? Quick recap. Here's what we know so far, and the one detail that still doesn't fit. The first trick wasn't rubber or ivory. It was a name change. When a philanthropic association becomes a state overnight, who notices what powers quietly switched hands? Europe is rushing into Africa, and everyone knows it. The scramble is not just greed. It is fear. Fear that if you do not seize territory now, your rivals will. Fear that you will be left out of the next century's wealth, and in this rush, rules begin to matter. Not rules for Africans, rules for Europeans. In 1884, Germany's Chancellor, Otto von Bismarck, calls a conference in Berlin. He claims he wants order, free trade, stability. But the room is full of competing appetites. Portugal wants recognition of old claims near the Congo mouth. France wants expansion from the north and west. Britain wants the river open for commerce. Germany wants influence. And Leopold wants something simple. He wants the world to recognize his association as a sovereign power, not Belgium. Him. He arrives not as a conqueror, but as a solution. A small king offering a neutral state in the heart of Africa. A buffer. A free trade zone. He promises openness. He promises progress. He promises that no one will be locked out. The powers look at each other and calculate. A private king in the Congo may be easier to tolerate than a rival empire, and so they listen. But what happens when promises are written for diplomacy, not for truth? Stanley is remembered as an explorer, but in Leopold's system he functioned like a closer. What exactly was written into the treaties he collected? What did Congolese leaders think they were agreeing to? Now imagine the Congo as a spreadsheet. Quotas, outputs, penalties. Because someone in Brussels is about to turn human lives into monthly targets. In Berlin, language becomes a tool. The conference speaks of effective occupation. It speaks of protection of natives. It speaks of suppressing the slave trade. Those words sound like restraint. But they also sound like permission, because once you define the terms of occupation, you define the pathway to seize. Once you claim you are protecting people, you justify controlling them. Leopold's representatives present his association as capable, organized, benevolent. They produce Stanley's treaties. They present stations and flags. They show the shape of a state already half imagined, and the other powers, each guarding their own interests, accept what is convenient. They accept Leopold. They accept the idea of the Congo Free State. The name itself is a spell. Free. State. Two words that imply choice and law. But the people inside this future state were not in Berlin. They did not vote. They did not speak. They did not speak. They did not sign the final document. In February 1885, the agreement is sealed. Leopold has his recognition. A country becomes a private project. The ink is barely dry. And already, the meaning of free is changing. So what will Leopold do now that the world has handed him a kingdom on paper? The Berlin Conference didn't carve Africa with knives in the room. It did it with definitions. When Europe agreed on effective occupation, who got to decide what counted as effective? The Congo Free State is born with a contradiction at its heart. It must appear moral to survive internationally, but it must produce wealth to survive financially. Leopold is not a romantic. He is a manager. He builds a system. He appoints officials. He raises a force. He creates courts, taxes, regulations, not to serve Congolese people. To extract. The challenge is scale. The territory is vast. The rivers are long. The forests are thick. Leopold cannot rule it directly from Brussels, so he rules it through incentives, quotas, bonuses, rewards for those who bring in ivory and rubber, punishments for those who do not. The state becomes a machine that eats what it measures. And what it measures is production. This is when the paper empire begins to gain a body made of posts and patrols and forced labor. The documents that legitimized Leopold in Berlin now become tools inside the Congo. Orders, passes, receipts, ledgers, paper that tracks human effort as if it were cargo. But who will enforce those quotas in places that never asked to be ruled? Quick recap. Here's what we know so far, and the one detail that still doesn't fit. Leopold promised free trade in the Congo, then built a system that made trade impossible without his permission. How do you sell the world a marketplace and deliver a monopoly instead? Here's the uncomfortable twist. The Congo Free State wasn't hidden from the world. It was advertised. So why did the advertising work so well? The enforcers arrive with uniforms and rifles. The force publique, a colonial army with African soldiers under European officers. Some soldiers are recruited. Some are coerced. They are told they are building order. They are told they are serving a state. They are told they are fighting slavery. But soon they are sent to collect. Rubber becomes the obsession. It is the age of bicycles and industrial belts and electrical insulation. Demand rises. In the Congo, rubber does not grow in neat plantations at first. It is pulled from wild vines. That means labor must move into forests. That means villagers must supply men to tap and carry. The state declares land vacant if it is not farmed in European ways. Forests become property of the state, and if the state owns the forest, it claims it owns the rubber. The people who live there are told they must work to pay taxes. Taxes paid not in money, in labor, in rubber, in ivory. The system tightens. Production targets rise. and violence becomes routine. A gunshot is faster than negotiation. A hostage is more efficient than persuasion. A burned village is a lesson to the next village. How did a so-called humanitarian state become a machine that runs on fear? A private king needed public legitimacy, so he recruited respectable allies, missionaries, businessmen, politicians. Which of them believed the story, and which of them just saw a chance to profit? In this system, the smallest acts become dangerous. A family hides food, a village delays, a man runs. The response is collective. A patrol arrives. Hostages are taken, often women. They are held until rubber is delivered. If quotas are not met, punishment follows. Sometimes it is whipping. Sometimes it is execution. Sometimes it is mutilation. There is a reason mutilation becomes notorious. A bullet is supposed to be accounted for. Officers demand proof that ammunition was not wasted on hunting. Hands become receipts. Severed hands become numbers. Numbers become reports. Reports become proof of activeness. And the paper trail continues. A ledger in an office is connected to a scream in a village. A signature in Brussels is connected to a raid at dawn. This is the dark logic of the Congo Free State. It is not chaos, it is administration. But if terror is organized, how long can it be hidden from the outside world? The Congo Free State was presented as a buffer against slave raiders, but its own enforcement squads became the terror people feared. Who built the force publique, and what were they ordered to prove with violence? Leopold manages perception with the same care he manages extraction. He curates visitors, he controls information, he funds public relations. He donates to churches and charities in Europe. He builds monuments and boulevards at home, and he insists the Congo is a philanthropic achievement. Critics, he says, are jealous. Reports of abuse, he says, are exaggerations. He points to the language of Berlin. He points to the promise of ending slavery. He points to the promise of ending slavery. He points to the word free. He also points to trade, ivory shipments, rubber profits, revenue that can be shown, bricks that can be touched. The Congo's suffering is far away. Belgium's new buildings are close. Distance becomes an accomplice. But distance is not permanent, because stories travel, letters travel, photographs travel, and in time, witnesses travel too. So who will be the first to connect the elegant paper empire to the violence it requires? Quick recap. Here's what we know so far, and the one detail that still doesn't fit. If you can't tax a colony you don't technically own, you redesign ownership itself. So how did Leopold rewrite land into vacant property, and what happened to the people who already lived on it? Pause the violence and look at the receipts, because the money trail is about to point to the one place Leopold couldn't resist spending it. At first, the outside world hears fragments. Missionaries write home. Traders whisper. A few officials resign and speak cautiously. But the Congo Free State is difficult to see clearly. Travel is slow. Communication is controlled. Interests are tangled. And many Europeans want the project to work. They want the idea of a civilized empire. They want profit without guilt. Then evidence accumulates. Not one story. Many. Different places. Same patterns. Hostages. Forced labor. Punitive expeditions. Villages emptied. Bodies left as warnings. The humanitarian mask begins to slip. And that is when the paper empire faces its greatest enemy. Not a rival nation. Not an African army. A moral scandal. Because in Europe, legitimacy is also paper, newspaper columns, parliamentary debates, pamphlets, petitions. The same medium that built Leopold's Congo can be used to tear it down. But will anyone with authority be willing to confront a king who has been internationally recognized? Rubber didn't just become valuable, it became urgent, and urgency changes what governments forgive. When prices surged, who in Europe chose not to ask where the rubber was coming from? A key turning point comes through a bureaucrat's eyes. A man sent not to protest, but to inspect. A consul whose job is to observe trade conditions. In the early 1900s, Roger Casement travels through the Congo and listens. He speaks to missionaries. He speaks to survivors. He records what he sees. He writes it down in official language. That matters, because official language carries weight in imperial capitals. Casement's report describes forced labor and systematic violence. It describes a society being squeezed until it breaks. The report lands like a stone, not because abuses were unimaginable, but because the Congo Free State had promised the opposite. Leopold is confronted by the thing he fears. Documentation. Not rumor, not gossip, a paper trail against his own paper empire. But even a report can be buried. Governments can stall. Diplomats can soften conclusions. So who will turn official findings into public pressure that cannot be ignored? The system had a measurement problem. Distant officials needed numbers to prove success. When quotas became the only proof that mattered, what did that force local commanders to do to meet them? For a second, listen to the silence. Entire regions stop producing food, stop holding markets, stop traveling. And that silence has a cause. Activists step in where governments hesitate. E.D. Morel, a shipping clerk turned campaigner, notices something odd. Ships leave Europe for the Congo carrying rifles, chains and ammunition. They return carrying rubber and ivory. There is not much trade goods in between. Morel realizes the system is not commerce, it is extraction backed by force. He writes, he organizes, he speaks, he helps form the Congo Reform Association. Its goal is simple: expose the reality, and they do it with modern tools. Newspapers, public meetings, photographs, testimonies read aloud. The campaign grows. Writers join, clergy join. Politicians begin to pay attention. The Congo becomes a cause in Britain and beyond. Leopold fights back. He hires lobbyists. He funds counterclaims. He attacks the credibility of witnesses. He insists his project is being sabotaged. The battle becomes two narratives, one of civilization, one of a civilization, one of atrocity. And both are fought with paper. So when the world begins to believe the reformers, what does Leopold do to save his possession? Quick recap. Here's what we know so far, and the one detail that still doesn't fit. Reports of atrocities reached Europe early, but they arrived as rumors, not evidence. What turns scattered testimony into a scandal powerful enough to threaten a king's entire project? Leopold tries to reform without surrendering. He announces commissions. He promises investigations. He issues decrees. Some changes occur on paper, but the structure remains. The state still depends on coerced labor. Officials still chase quotas, profits still flow, and the king still insists the Congo is his personal achievement. Yet the pressure grows. International criticism intensifies. Belgium can no longer pretend it has nothing to do with it. Parliament debates what once seemed unthinkable: annexation. Taking the Congo out of Leopold's hands. For Leopold, this is both an insult and a threat. He did not build the paper empire to watch it become a Belgian colony with oversight. He wants control. He wants immunity. He wants to keep the wealth. But the scandal has created a new reality. A private king with a private colony has become a liability, and liabilities get managed. So will Belgium step in as a savior, or as a new owner continuing the same system under a different name? Leopold's defenders kept repeating one word: civilization. But when investigators finally compared the claims to the ground truth, what detail made the official narrative collapse? The scandal doesn't break in the Congo. It breaks in Europe, when a piece of respectable testimony lands on the wrong desk. In 1908, Belgium annexes the Congo Free State. The personal property becomes the Belgian Congo. Leopold loses his private kingdom. But the transfer is not a clean moral victory. It is a political solution, a way to quiet the outrage, a way to stabilize international relations, a way to keep the colony within a recognized framework. Leopold negotiates compensation. He ensures that debts and assets are arranged in ways that protect his interests. He is not dragged to a courtroom. He is not publicly tried. He does not stand before the people who suffered. He dies the next year, in 1909. And even in death, arguments continue. Some remember him as a builder in Belgium. Some remember him as a builder in Belgium. Some remember him as the architect of horror in Central Africa. The paper empire is no longer his, but its marks remain. Because bureaucracy does not vanish when ownership changes, it adapts. So after Leopold, what happens to the Congolese people trapped inside a colonial system that still needs their labor? Even reform had a strange problem. Ending the abuse meant admitting the fraud. So why did major powers delay action for years? What did they fear losing if Leopold fell? Under Belgian rule, the most extreme abuses of the Free State era are reduced. Some reforms are real. Administration becomes more standardized. Missionary education expands. Infrastructure grows. But the foundation remains colonial. Political power is still European. Land and resources are still controlled by outsiders. Forced labor does not disappear overnight. Economic coercion continues. And the Congo is still treated as a source of minerals, a source of agricultural wealth, a source of strategic value. The human cost has already been vast. Communities have been broken. Populations have been displaced. Trust has been shattered. Trauma has become generational. The world moves on, as it often does. Outrage fades. New crises take the headlines, but the Congo remains. And the map drawn in Berlin still shapes what follows. The borders remain. The logic of extraction remains. The story that began as a humanitarian promise remains contested. So when we look back at that night in Berlin, what are we really seeing? A diplomatic agreement, or the opening scene of a catastrophe? Return to the beginning. Berlin, 1885. A room where men spoke of free trade and civilization. They believed they were creating order, or they pretended to. Leopold believed he was creating greatness, or he pretended to. Leopold believed he was creating greatness. The truth is that the Congo Free State was never just a mistake. It was a design that relied on distance, on paperwork, on plausible deniability. A design that turned human beings into inputs and turned violence into a management tool. This is why the story matters beyond one king. Because it shows how modern cruelty can wear modern clothes. It can speak the language of philanthropy. It can publish reports. It can hold conferences. It can call itself free, and it can still build a system that breaks bodies. The paper empire did not need to hide everything. It only needed to hide enough. Long enough. Until the rubber was shipped. Until the money was spent. Until the buildings rose in Europe, and when the scandal finally forced change, the map remained. The extraction remained. The imbalance remained. So here is the final question. the one the ink could not answer in Berlin. When a nation is created on paper by outsiders, who pays the price when the paper becomes law?